Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. Specifically on this video, I'm talking about the full moon in Virgo on the 18th of March, but of course I'm looking at the setting for that full moon, which is all important because it makes a huge difference to what's going on in our lives and also what's going on generally in terms of the world. Now, this is not a supermoon. There will be a couple of supermoons this year, but this is not one of them. But that doesn't mean it isn't powerful or significant for us. In fact, there are a couple of reasons why I think this is a rather significant full moon, not only because it's coming at a time of great turmoil in the world, and therefore whenever we get a full moon, we get an opportunity to close and complete, so it can bring things to a tipping point, after which that's an end. On the other hand, it can also bring simmering situations to boiling point, and we get that push come to shove thing. Again, let's think of that in light of what's going on in our world, and of course in our own lives as well. This full moon, especially if it connects with something in our own chart, then we have that same scenario really playing long and loud. We have an opportunity to close and complete. Some things might be at an end, and on other occasions, it's as though a simmering situation has come to the bubble. If we think about Virgo as a sign, we think about Virgo's ability to synthesize situations, which means to analyze and process, to connect the dots. And I think this becomes very interesting when we look at the fact that this full moon connects to the planet Pluto. The moon itself is sextiling Pluto. The sun, which of course is opposing the moon, is trining Pluto. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the video. But just for now, if we can see this full moon making a connection with Pluto, we get the idea of those creative, destructive principles of the planet Pluto. And we look at it, we can see that if we're prepared to dig deep, if we're prepared to look into the dark of a situation, then we may find something of immense value there. So it is an opportunity to find resolution, but also an opportunity to see things we didn't want to look at. And that's just a general theme. Now, other things that I want to look at about this full moon, we can see in a little sharper detail if we look at the horoscope. Now, as you can see from this horoscope, if you look at the top left-hand corner where I put it, the data, you'll see I've set it from the position of Moscow. Now, again, I make these choices because I really want to be able to see quite clearly the dynamic effect of a full moon or a new moon. I want to be able to see them clearly. And it just so happened that Moscow was perfect for this. But of course, Moscow, very much the center of affairs, or rather Russia. Moscow being the capital of Russia means this is Russia. So this full moon may be particularly important for this country. But what I want you to look at here is the full moon itself, the sun up towards the top of the chart, and at the bottom, the moon in Virgo. Now, the sun is close to the planet Neptune, that trident image. That's really significant. I'm going to come to that in a moment. The full moon is none too far away from Jupiter because, of course, Jupiter and Neptune are becoming closer and closer. And of course, we also have Mercury in Pisces as well. Mercury actually goes into Pisces on the 10th of March. And that means for all you Pisceans, or if you've got Pisces rising, then you are given the power of speech, I would say. This is the principle of Mercury coming directly into your sign. It's all about communication and movement, whether that means movement quite literally in terms of travel, or whether it means your ability to move things forward, or the fact that things move forward. So Pisces particular may want to think about that around the 10th of March and the beginning of a 3-week period of movement and the transmission of information. But we also need to look at planet Uranus, because this is significant in this case as well. And we can see that sort of television aerial, old-fashioned television aerial, in the left-hand sector of our chart. And that is actually very closely angling Venus in Aquarius, and Mars is rising to that point as well. And in fact, the day after the full moon, on the 19th of March, Venus will exactly square Uranus. So we have to build two important factors into this full moon. We have to build in the Venus-Uranus background, which makes it very controversial and conflict-ridden, but also the capacity always with Uranus for breakthrough. And we also need to look at that Sun-Neptune conjunction, which happened on the 13th of March, but is already, was already playing into that full moon expression. And what do we have with Sun-Neptune conjunctions? Well, we get that at the best level, at the top level, we get inspiration, we get compassion, we get miracles, we get extraordinary things that have to do with faith. And also in terms of spirituality and consciousness, the Sun-Neptune conjunction does tend to amplify that. But on the downside, we get confusion, we get fog, the fog of war, the fog of misinformation and disinformation about situations. And I have to say, those of you who are used to reading my Friday Bites, that I've been talking about Neptune in regard to COVID throughout these past 2 years, because every time we get an important connection to Neptune, we seem to get a new development, whether that's the breakthrough on the vaccines, whether it's a new variant, whether it's something related to long COVID. Usually when we get Sun-Neptune, especially a Sun conjunct Neptune, and now we get a full moon opposing that, there is some pretty big development linked to the whole of the COVID pandemic situation. Now, if we also look at the Venus-Uranus square, which is very potent at this particular time, we think about, when we put these two planets together, often we get sudden romantic attractions, we get things happening suddenly that we didn't expect, and they can sometimes have to do with things that are beneficial to us in life. They can be things to do with the arts, with music, with beauty, with love. This is always a Venus-Uranus combination. But we get the downside of that Venus-Uranus, and we get breakups and breakdowns and all those things that amount to, things that we can't seem to make account for at the time, but yet they really do interrupt the smooth flow of lives. And I think one of the things we need to look at in this period, just generally around the full moon, that's just before it and just after it, is this idea of things to do with technology and the internet. These are times that we can get either wonderful new technology coming forward, but also a whole lot of scams and viruses and all those kind of things that can happen. So I think certainly around this full moon time, we all need to be a little more careful of anything that's driven by computer technology or any kind of technology. And if we're driving the car or using the washing machine, as I often say, pay a little bit more attention, because things tend to break down, or as I said, sometimes we get a breakthrough. We can't always rely on that. A little after the full moon, on the 20th of March, the sun will move into Aries. And of course, that's a whole different kind of sign from Pisces. Each sign, next door neighbor sign, is totally different. And this is why often when I get asked, I'm born on the cusp, I'm a bit of Pisces and I'm a bit of Aries. No, you're not. You're either an Aries or a Pisces. That's the reason your sun is either 29 degrees, 59 minutes of Pisces, or it's 0 degrees, 0 minutes of Aries. You can't be both. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have other planets in Pisces if you're a 0 degrees Aries, or planets in Aries if you're a late or last kind of edge of Pisces. But technically where the sun is where the sun is, and you're on much firmer ground by thinking that, especially when you've got little babies who are born on the 20th, 21st, you'll want to know, do I have a baby Aries on my hands? Have I got a little pioneer? Or do I have a Pisces, in which case I can do pretty well everything because this little person is just going to go with the flow? Okay, so there's a sharp difference in those two extremes. But of course, as soon as the sun comes into Aries, then we have the vernal equinox. And of course, we set up a chart for the Aries ingress, which means looking at all sorts of things about, the following quarter from the perspective of each country. And we base that chart on, the capital of that country. If we're going to look at the fortunes of Great Britain for the next 3 months, we have London as our place. And if we're going to look at it from Australia's point of view, well, I suppose we go to Canberra, really, but could be Sydney. And that's the way we astrologers judge a quarter. But I'll focus on that in my next video rather than this one. I just want to mention it en passant. And by the way, having talked about Venus coming up to Uranus, Mars will be exactly square Uranus on the 22nd of March. So that really is a day when things can go kind of stir crazy, although there might also be days when inspiration is high and the sense of ingenuity. If I can't do this, I'll do that. Necessity being the mother of invention. We get a lot of great breakthroughs because we can't go the way we thought we were going to go when Mars and Uranus are in square. So that is the picture of the surrounding times for this full moon. And so I'm going to move on now. What I'm going to do now is take us through this full moon sign by sign so we can see where its action is more pointed to. So of course, if we're a Pisces, if you have Pisces rising or you are a Sun Pisces, then this full moon takes place in the area of relationships. Now, we know that because I've just mentioned it, this idea of resolution, we're looking also at digging deep to find solutions and confronting things that need to be confronted, although we're also looking at simmering situations reaching boiling point. Well, this is most likely applicable to relationships in general and one relationship in particular. Now, another factor about having the sun in your sign or having, Pisces rising, so the full moon is in the 7th house, you have this idea of completion here. So it might be, the completion of a love affair could mean moving on towards marriage or living together, or it could be that you've just gone as far as you can with this relationship. And of course, whenever I look at full moons, I look at the new moon, which began the cycle. And that new moon took place on the 7th of September last year. So again, think back to events, things that began around that time in September, because they have a completion date of the 18th of March. Now, completion, as I said, can mean it's a done and dusted deal and we're onward and upward after that, or it can mean we are done and dusted, that's it. We're looking at both those things. And I certainly think if you're a Pisces rising, moon in Virgo, then we've got this idea of emotions being very full at this time. And of course, often when we're on an emotional high, things can seem almost more perfect and more joyous than they would otherwise. But the same is true if you're feeling blue, then you're going to feel bluer than ever, Pisces, if you've got this full moon happening around that time. Now, if we go to the opposite sign and we look at Virgo, we've got the moon in Virgo in your 1st house. And this is always a time of empowerment. Now, when I think about the sign of Virgo, you're often a backseat player. You like to be behind the seat and steering, being a backseat driver. You don't necessarily like to come to the forefront, show your hands, and start to get very directorial. But the thing is, when the moon is in your sign, what it means, or the full moon, you can harness your will to your emotions. And that's really very powerful. When that occurs, mountains can be moved. So to recognize at this point, if you have, you're a Virgo and you've got the full moon in your sign, or you have Virgo rising and the moon is in your first house, know that you have this power and make the most of it. So often it's about timing, isn't it? We always want to know when to do the right thing. But if you're feeling the moment, Virgo, then go with it, because that's all sorts of things coming together at the right moment. Relationships may come into it for you as well, because of course the sun is moving through the area of relationships for you. So again, rather like Pisces, it's time to commit, time to make something concrete, or it's time to say, we've reached the end of this particular road. And again, that idea of early September, mid-September, being an important reference point to what is happening around the time of the full moon. If we look at Gemini, we're looking at this full moon in the 4th house and the sun in the 10th house. And it's the same if you're Gemini rising, moon in the 4th, the sun in the 10th. So we're on that axis of life direction and our base in life, the position we have in the world, that space, and also where we are in terms of our home base, where we feel at home. So this is a very important full moon, not only for getting things in balance, finding that good life-work balance, or the balance between what we want to do in life and what we want to have happen in life versus the responsibilities we have to our family, or those needs which are very, very close to home. So this full moon may bring up events and experiences that really relate to this and give you that kind of opportunity to balance things out. But life may be at a bit of an extreme for you, Gemini, at this time. And always important, because you're a very mental sign in the best of ways. You think things through all the time. Your mind is a very overworked organ of the body. What you need to do is really chill at this time. Meditate if you can meditate. Do some yoga if you know how to do yoga. Do everything to detach yourself from the intensity of what's going around at this time. And yes, it may coincide with the end of a job for you, or it may coincide with a time where perhaps you feel that you want to have space and time to do other things that are more important. So the whole issue of where am I going in life and what I want my life to be, that's going to be something that's going to be coming up around the time of this full moon. As I said earlier, this full moon is all about resolution and shedding light into dark corners to find something of value therein. And that may very well relate to where you're headed in life, Gemini. For Sagittarius, it's the absolute opposite. And so we have we have the full moon in the 10th house of the horoscope, the sun in the 4th house. So for you, there could be issues regarding your job or work that seem to be, should we say, fluctuating. It's changing from day to day, so you're not sure where you stand in terms of a job. Or you may feel rather differently about the aims and aspirations and plans that you have at the moment. It feels different from time to time, and that isn't easy for you to make a decision. So that's why I think this full moon is rather important, because it gives you an opportunity to settle something, to come to a conclusion. I mean, remember, that's another very good phrase to use with a full moon, reaching a conclusion, which both means things coming to an end, but also reaching a conclusion in the sense of, I know what to do. I know what I have to do. Now, for you, this idea of things coming to an end may have to do with something in your home and family life. Maybe you're indeed considering moving house, or, doing something that amounts to ending a chapter for family life. It's part of the ever, wave of life, from endings to beginnings, from dissolution to also creation. We have those waves going through our lives, which are so brought to us very clearly in the new moon, full moon cycle. So this is a time to close with the idea of new beginnings following. Now, if we come to Taurus, this full moon is on the creative axis of your horoscope. We're looking at the moon itself in the 5th house, the sun in the 11th house. So we're seeing the end of a gestation period. Now, this could be quite literal in some cases. Maybe a baby is due any day and you think, well, that's perfect. I have definitely come to the end of a gestation period. But in the main, this is about some other creative process that has been gestating for a while and now is ready in a complete form, ready to be delivered. So it might be a creative project at work. It might be something that you've been working on with a couple of people. It might even relate to a social thing, something that you've been putting together, a very special event. And it's time, all the preparation is done, and it's time for that event to happen. But we're also, I think, looking at the idea here, because this is the area of the heart. So we could be looking at an affair of the heart being at a very important stage. And certainly if you began a love affair in that September period, or you began one in the December, mid to late December, then this could be an important juncture for that love affair. Have your feelings changed? Have they deepened? Is it time to make more of a commitment to this relationship? Or has suddenly that buzz and hum and everything that this love affair began with suddenly begun in the light of day not to look so wonderful? Are you seeing the real person coming out of the projection and perhaps not seeing what you want to see? So there could be some important decisions if you're a Taurus or you've got Taurus rising to make about a love affair. If we come to the opposite sign and we think about Scorpio, we're still on that creative axis, only the sun is moving through the 5th house, the moon is in the 11th house. So the emphasis is a little bit more on collaborations. So we're in this whole area of teamwork, team spirit, working together as a team. And of course, when you think about that polarity, where the 5th house is all about me, and the 11th house is all about, well, we in a way, how we share and collaborate. There is that existential tension between how much of you is attached to the projects, relationships, and things you're involved with, and how much needs to be focused on a bigger end, on the ends or being a little bit more important, the whole picture being more important than your particular part in it. But very much like Taurus, we could have a love affair in here, or even an enterprise that began, and you're at a point where you know whether this, or you feel you have to know, whether this enterprise has got legs and it's worth moving on with, or whether really the downsides outweigh all the upsets and maybe it's time to close it off. So we're looking very much here at collaborations, enterprises, and also love affairs, again with that idea of September and September's events playing into March's conclusions. Now, if we come to Leo, well, we're in the area of money and self-esteem. It's the 2nd house that this is focused in. Leo rising, or you are a Leo, the full moon being in that 2nd house. Now, of course, with full moons, we tie things up. And I think in terms of finance, we need to look at our accounts and sort them out and kind of figure out where we've gone wrong, where we've gone right. We're going to close agreements. We're going to decide on certain measures that needs to happen in regard to our finances. Now, in the same way that I talked about simmering situations coming to boiling point, maybe a simmering financial situation has come to boiling point. Whatever it is, remember also looking in those dark places, the places we don't want to look. That's the place to look for solutions and conclusions. And of course, this house, this sign, isn't just about finance. It's about the value we place in ourselves and the values we have in life. So the full moon brings both crisis, but it also brings that idea of completion as well. But as a, just a little tip here, if around the time of the full moon, you find an issue rearing its head about, I'm not valued enough, I'm being treated badly, I deserve better, that's the full moon knocking at the door of the second house. And maybe a little pep talk to yourself is required to reboot your self-esteem, because we can only be affected when we're wobbling. When our sense of what we're doing and who we are is a little bit fragile, then we're vulnerable. But when we feel strong and we know things about ourselves, we are able to withstand that. And other people take their, they react to our strengths. So that's also something else to remember about that full moon. It's a time to reboot your self-worth. If we look at the sign of Leo, we've just done Leo. If we look at the sign of Aquarius, which is opposition Leo, then we have the reverse in process. We've got the full moon in the 8th house, the sun in the 2nd house. So with the sun moving through the 2nd house anyway, and of course, if you have Aquarius rising, it'll be the same thing. The sun will be moving through the 2nd house. We've got an extended period of time when all sorts of things to do with recognition, our value system, our money are in progress. So we look specifically at the full moon in the 8th house, then what we're drawing into this a little bit more are shared financial relationships. So it's your relationship with credit card companies and banks and lending institutions, your business partners, or your life partner with whom you share finances. So it becomes a time where you can close deals, where you can sign contracts, and you can put things to bed in a good way. You can feel you've got somewhere financially, and from this point, you're going to be starting a new chapter, if you like. But for others, it's more the same thing as I was saying for Leo. You've got this idea that simmering situations come to the bubble. So there could be a bit of a difficulty with a financial commitment or a shared financial responsibility that really requires negotiation and discussion. And in fact, I think I would place the emphasis on negotiation here, not extreme actions. This is also an area of intimacy. So for many, Aquarians or Aquarius rising individuals, it's time really to look at that area of intimacy. And if you've got no one in your life with whom to be intimate, is it really getting to a point where you really need to change your views on all of this, change the record? Or is it that in your existing relationship, the doors to intimacy have become locked, and it's time really to open them and to get back to that sense of connection to someone else? Intimacy, certainly in the moon's beams at this particular time. So let's come to our final 4, which are the cardinal signs. And we look at this full moon in the 6th house for you, Aries. And this is very much Virgo territory anyway. And if you have Aries rising, the moon will be in the 6th house too. So everything I was talking about, doing the work of life here, getting to analyze situations, connect the dots, to get your systems functioning properly, that full moon will expose weaknesses in the system. So that can mean things are letting you down because you're not organized, or you haven't got things running in a way that they should be running. And this full moon is going to say, oh, you need to do something about that. But we've also got a health system. So likewise, if you've been abusing your health system, you're going to find out about it at this full moon. It's time to look at, the stress you're taking on, and that's not good for your health system. It's looking at your lifestyle or what you eat or all those things, what you're making yourself vulnerable to, which now needs really examining and something done about it. And yes, on a different level, it could be that a job comes to an end. You've done a certain amount of work and it's over. You can move on to something else. And certainly, I think a full moon definitely illuminates where you feel valued. at work, or the work you do is of value and purpose to you. So these things may come up at the time of the full moon, and they've come up for resolution. They require looking at. And I think, you know, always, what's the purpose of life? We often find that answer in the 6th house. So that might be particularly important for you, Aries. For you, Libra, the moon, the full moon is in the 12th house. So that's the area of shadows. So we're really in the big area of the sea of the unconscious mind. So at times like this, when you get a full moon in your 12th house, it's almost as though you are more plugged into the bigger picture. Your intuitions are more profound. Your dreams have more impact on you. And rather like what I was saying for Aries, the idea that the full moon will illuminate where, you know, you've been taking too much stress and not really looking after yourself. The full moon here for you, Libra, is saying, by taking more rest, by cutting out the noise of life, by taking a little me time, what you're doing is allowing your unconscious mind to process information, to process and dissolve experiences, events that perhaps you've only looked at a peripheral level. And what you need to do is process them on a much deeper, more profound level. And this you'll be able to do if you're fully rested or during the time of sleep in terms of dreams. So look at what things are coming up at this time, Libra. Are you actually feeling that you're being given some information? You're plugged into the big collective unconscious and you know more about that. And it's to obey your intuition, to look at the nuances of situations that may be particularly revealing to you. Now, here we come to Cancer. For you, this is the 3rd house. Now, all these houses that I'm looking at the moment, I'm looking at the 6th house for Aries, the 12th house for Libra, the 3rd house for Cancer, the 9th house for Capricorn. These are the seeking houses. We're seeking something. We're seeking knowledge. We're seeking experience. We're seeking to achieve something. So with the 3rd house, this is about the kind of information that you need in order to be able to move forward. It may mean you need some very practical information from somebody or, you know, a company, and that will help you make a decision. It could be that you need to look more deeply into a situation, research it, get more information in order to be able to maximize what you want to achieve. This full moon might also say you've come to the end of a study course. Maybe you finished studying and it's time to close the books and close the door on that, and you're ready for the off. You know, maybe you're taking a test of some description. Maybe exams are coming up, and so you've been furiously kind of, doing all that revision that exams require. It's really come to an end, and you now have to be able to deliver what you've processed. But it could also be a bit of a crunch point with something that you're doing, or a study course, or information that you're trying to acquire, and you're thinking, maybe this is all too much for me. Maybe really I need something totally different. I would advise on a full moon that you allow the feelings to develop and to reveal themselves, but don't take action until you've processed them a bit more. There's a bit of a journey going on with a full moon, either in the 3rd house or the 9th house. So you're working your way through something. You're coming to the end of a journey, quite literally in some cases, but certainly metaphorically. And it's all important to process that and feel that you're now really ready to make the understandings that you need to make and make the journeys. You've done the journey to that. For Capricorn, we're looking at the 9th house, and we're taking the idea of the end of a journey into a much wider space. We're looking maybe at some long distance travel here. So maybe you're tying up arrangements for travel later in the year, or maybe a very long journey is imminent. But of course, we can make a journey, as I was saying a little moment ago, this idea of it's a metaphor for, the journey we make in knowledge and experience. And this being a seeking house, you're probably seeking a lot of kind of spiritual understanding about a situation. And this is what it needs too. You need to be able to look at a situation from a higher perspective and see it in a much bigger context. And that will help you make a good decision, and it will help you see a situation in the way that it needs to be seen. And yes, for you too, this could be the end of a learning period, and you're ready perhaps to move on from what you've learned. And I think all in all, this, the third ninth axis in a horoscope has a lot to do with some of the way we're always learning in life. Every experience we have is a learning experience. But when we put a full moon here, we're really coming to conclusions about that experience of life. So there's my trip through the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I guess I want to come to my conclusion now. And this is in two parts, in a way. Because, I look at this full moon and I think about Pluto being part of it. And I'm thinking, and I talked about the idea of going in deep, going into the dark and finding something of value there. Now, often you'll find, other astrologers, and I suppose myself, just as guilty as this. And when we talk about aspects, we talk about easy aspects and difficult aspects. And we talk about the easy aspects being the trines, the sextiles, the quintiles. And we talk about hard aspects, the more challenging ones being the squares, the oppositions, the conjunctions often, the inconjuncts. But something, in my long experience of astrology, the more dynamic experiences come from the hard aspects. That's when things really do speak to you, and there's a dynamism to those events. So when I was talking earlier about the full moon being sextile Pluto and the sun trining Pluto, it almost sounds as though, oh, this is a nice easy trip down into the underworld. No, it's not. Whenever you put any two planets together, in this case, we're looking at the sun and moon and Pluto, that very powerful creator, destroyer of the planetary team, something is eliminated to create space for the new to come in. You're still going to get that rather difficult, challenging, transformational Pluto energy from this full moon. It doesn't mean it's an easy journey to your underworld. It's still challenges there to be met. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I think sort of, as I was talking through all the different signs and the full moons from sign to sign, and a lot of it had to do with reaching conclusions and being able to make decisions on that full moon. And I think the message that I want to put across to you all, because we don't all of us have a little pet guru on our shoulders who we can say, okay, what do we do now? And what we're trying to do, I think, as we go through life and we get the experience of everything we've gone through, the mistakes we've made, the decision makings that haven't been too good, and the decision makings that turned out to be just right. What we're hoping to do is to be able to trust our own decision-making powers. Now, this doesn't mean that we listen to the voice of our hopes or fears. No, it doesn't. It means going into ourselves and finding the truth. And that's something we often feel in our tummies. We feel it in our core. We know what's right, what we should do, and what we need to do. And often, when it comes to decision making, it's the hard decision that's the right decision. And again, thinking about, the last couple of days in my life and dealing with my clients, I have had a client who really wanted me to help her pick an absolute day and time and moment to perform a certain action. And, you know, sometimes I will do that, even though it's a challenge because there are so many variables in astrology. But on this occasion, I knew the right answer for my client was to say, trust yourself. You know this decision. You know what you need to do at the time you need to do it. And somehow giving her permission to trust herself became so empowering. And she made the right decision. So this is the end of this video. And the next one, as I said, I promise I will do looking at the Aries Ingress, which is always important for country to country. In the meantime, take care and live your life to the full. You never get these moments again. Bye for now.